Thank you. Dr. Simon, Director of the CSDS, Dr. Peishoba, I sound right, ne? 合ってますね. Okay. A Senior Fellow of CSDS, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government of Japan, I would like to congratulate the BUB CSDS, one of the Europe's most influential think tanks in Brussels, on the establishment of the Japan chair and on the appointment of Senior Fellow Peishoba as the chair holder. Congratulations. I would also like to congratulate the organizer on holding this launch event today, overcoming the impact of the coronavirus disaster. And thank you for wearing a mask in the room. And outside is free to remove your mask. So please do that. And I believe that sound government policies come from diversified ideas and free discussions to obtain public understandings and support for the relevant policies. It is also important to disseminate accurate information domestically and internationally. So moreover, I am convinced that the collaboration with influential think tanks is essential in advancing these efforts. CSDS, as already known, has been promoting concrete cooperation with Japan, such as through the Japan program supported by the Japan Foundation. To further strengthen such efforts, the Japanese government has decided to contribute funds to establish the Japan chair of CSDS. I am pleased we have been able to further strengthen our cooperation with CSDS. Distinguished guests, we are now at a turning point in history. I visited Brussels in April this year and attended the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting for the first time as Japanese Foreign Minister. The meeting was held against the backdrops of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Russia's aggression is an outrageous act that has shaken the very foundation of the free and open international order based on the rule of law. At the meeting, I stressed that the security of Europe and that of the Indo-Pacific cannot be separated, and emphasized that the time had arrived to strengthen cooperation between Japan and like-minded countries and partners. The cooperation between Japan and the European countries, as well as the EU and the NATO, must be upgraded to a new level for the future. In the Indo-Pacific region, unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion are continuing, including in the East and South China Sea. In China, Xi Jinping has entered his third term, and the international community is closely watching how things are evolving from now. Furthermore, we have more. North Korea has been intensifying its nuclear and missile activities, which pose a growing security threat. The post-Cold War international order is dynamically changing. It's extremely important for Europe and Japan to cooperate on the various issues. This is because we not only share the very fundamental values and interests, but also have the will and the ability to tackle them. The international situation as seen from Europe is not necessarily the same as that seen from Japan. Through examination of the situations from both the Japanese and European perspectives, we can clearly identify the challenges to be addressed and approaches to be adopted. I believe this will help direct our efforts toward appropriate solutions. In this regard, I hope that the Japan chair of CSDS will conduct vigorous research and disseminate the resulting insights, even if they are sometimes not what we want to hear. That's the important point. I trust the Japan chair as a hub for Japanese studies. We're engaged with the global political community about Japan's international contributions and the potential for cooperation between Japan and Europe. At the same time, it will no doubt foster a large number of people with positive attitude towards Japan, together with brilliant scholars from all over the world. Finally, I would like to conclude my remarks by asking for the continuous cooperation of the many people involved with CSDS, especially those who have joined us today in launching the Japan Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Hayashi, for attending today. And everyone, please let us show appreciation. Our next keynote address will be delivered by Mr. Enrique Mora, who has been Deputy Secretary General for Political Affairs and Political Director at the European External Action Service since 2020. Prior to that, Mr. Mora worked for over 30 years at the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Mora, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to opening this seminar. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, less than 2 weeks ago, on October the 12th, to be precise, in New York, the nations of the world made a choice, and it was a far-reaching choice. By 143 votes to a mere 5, the General Assembly voted to condemn the illegal attempt by Russia to annex parts of Ukraine's territory. The message from the world community was very clear. Might doesn't make right. It never has, and it never will. Here in Tokyo, last May, Prime Minister Kishida, the President of the European Council, Michel, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, they declare the EU and Japan to be in united opposition to Russia's barbaric war of aggression. At their summit, they condemn Russia's unjustified and unprovoked military attack against Ukraine. They call for immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Russian forces from the entire territory of Ukraine, and full respect for Ukraine's territorial integrity. The EU and Japan continue to provide substantial political, financial, humanitarian, diplomatic, material support to Ukraine. The European Union has pledged military support for more than 3 billion euros. Last Monday, we adopted another package of 500, so that goes to 3.5 billion euros in addition to the contributions of member states. The EU and Japan are working to address the global effects of energy, food, security shortages. We are challenging false narratives and disinformation about the war. We are calling for those responsible for war crimes and atrocities to be brought to justice. In close coordination within the G7 and with other like-minded partners around the world, we impose sanctions on Russia to weaken Putin's economic base for aggression until it reverses course. In other words, Japan and the EU are at the core of the international action to resist gross violations of international law and the UN Charter. And we do that because we know perfectly what is at stake. On the one hand, the immediate and necessary suffering in Ukraine, where lives are being lost, livelihoods ruined, and infrastructure destroyed. And in all the corners of the world where people are struggling with hardships created by Putin's war, shortages, rising prices of food, fuel, and other essentials. On the other hand, the distractions of the rule-based international order that is essential for global peace, stability, and prosperity. Those are key values. Respecting them starts with adherence to the UN Charter and international law. The European Union and its member states are proud to stand with Japan in its defense. No wonder that respect for human rights, the rule of law, and democracy are the basis of our partnership and cooperation. That's why we look forward to working alongside with Japan during the presidency of the G7 next year, within the G20, and during the upcoming mandate of Japan as non-permanent member of the Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU is also keen to work with Japan in Japan's neighborhood, the Indo-Pacific. The EU has a big stake in the future of this region, and we believe we have a big contribution to make. That's why we launched our strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. During my time here in Tokyo, I will discuss how best to boost our cooperation in this region, as well as globally. We will base our cooperation in this region on our shared values, our interests, and their respective visions for the region. Our joint efforts will lean on the strengths of our bilateral relationship, underpinned by our strategic partnership agreement and our economic partnership agreement. This includes new areas. For example, a new digital partnership announced in May. Over time, it will encourage delivery of digital infrastructures, enhance digital skills, enable digital transformation of businesses, and digitalization of public services. It will facilitate digital trade and produce greater resistance in the semiconductor supply chain. The EU and Japan are also moving ahead with our Green Alliance, announced last year. It will help us to achieve modern and competitive economies. It will help us reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions, enhance our energy efficiency, deploy renewable energy on a large scale. Ultimately, it will reinforce our energy security. We also propose to use together the framework that we call Global Gateway. The EU will work with Japan to stimulate high-quality and sustainable projects under our connectivity partnership. Global Gateway is a €3 billion proposition, a €3 billion initiative, aims to create transport, digital, energy, people-to-people links that meet citizens' needs and attract private investment. In addition to those key policies, I'm also here to discuss how the EU and Japan can step up its cooperation on security and defense, including in the Indo-Pacific region. Our initial focus is on maritime security, cybersecurity, information manipulation and disinformation, and of course, non-proliferation and disarmament. The European Union, together with Germany and France, funds the project Enhancing Security in and with Asia, ESIWA, to develop the networks and exchanges that will oil the wheels of our cooperation. Japan and the European Union collaborate already successfully in counter-piracy activities of the Horn of Africa. The EU is developing a coordinated maritime presence in the Northwest Indian Ocean to help ensure safe shipping lanes in the region as a global public good. We consider this as a promising domain in which we can work together with Japan. We would like also to work more with Japan in other areas that can contribute jointly to peace and security. For example, our civilian missions in the framework of our common security and defense policy. An important step to enable such cooperation would be the conclusion of a security of information agreement, a framework participation agreement on our CSDP missions could follow. We are really proposing a number of initiatives to our Japanese friends. There are just a few ideas that I want to discuss with them in my visit here. Like Japan, the EU believes in a free and open Indo-Pacific. We want a rules-based region, inclusive, based on the rule of law. We want a region where freedom of navigation is respected and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea is the norm. We believe in a region unconstrained by coercion, whether political, economic, or military. Because the rules-based international order matters everywhere and to everyone. Here in the Indo-Pacific, as in Europe, as indeed in Ukraine, we are opposed to any unilateral attempt to change any status quo by force. Regardless of the location or whatever the means, whether with missiles over Taiwan, whether with missiles over Japan, they are serious threats to the whole international order. Allow me to quote the words of Prime Minister Kishida in June. He said, Ukraine today could be East Asia tomorrow. We cannot agree more with the Prime Minister. That's why we double down on our partnerships. That's why both Japan and the EU fully support the unity and centrality of ASEAN. That's why we look to strengthen cooperation with ASEAN in the region, including support for the ASEAN outlook for the Indo-Pacific. As we committed in the joint statement from our summit in May, we will look also to work with South Asian and Pacific Island countries. Global peace, stability, and prosperity, mentioned that before, are under threats from many challenges. They include present potential pandemics, accelerating climate change. These challenges require the European Union and Japan to play our part in addressing them and to work together with our partners around the world. That work can be substantially nourished by the ideas that are generated in seminars like this and by experts like those present in this room. Therefore, I pay tribute to our host and the event organizers, the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy and the Institute of Geoeconomics. I can only agree with Minister Hayashi, Minister Steerer, that the creation of the Japan chair at the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy in Brussels will add to the strengthening of the partnership between Japan and the European Union. I thank Minister Hayashi for the essential support of the government of Japan to this initiative. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mora. We will now move on to our panel discussion. The panel will be chaired by Dr. Eva Pejshova, who is Japan Chair at the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy. We have 4 panelists, and they are Dr. Naoko Eto, Dr. Daniel Fiot, Dr. Ken Jimbo, and Dr. Mikhail Wright-Rera. Could you please make your way to the stage?